Tim Carper, also known as Coach Carp. The name of my business is Skills and Drills Institute. The people I serve are usually athletes from the ages of 7 all the way up to probably 18, but can get into the college age as well.
Awesome. I can't wait to learn more. Tim, sports have been a huge part of your life since childhood. What first sparked your love for athletics, and why did football become the sport that captured your heart?
Well, football sparked my love for athletics. When I was younger, I can remember the first time I ever saw a professional football game. I'm gonna date myself here. It was probably 1984. um, I was watching. We were living up in we were in northern New Jersey. We had just moved out of New York City, out of Brooklyn, and I was watching the Giants play the Bears, and I was mesmerized by Walter Payton. Like I'd never seen it before, and I was just hooked as soon as I saw it. And at that point, football became like the sport that I loved, but something that I thought I wanted to do. And when I say thought, because I was watching adults or grown men play on TV, I thought you had to be an adult to do it. But there was a surprise waiting for me later on. Before we moved, I was riding my bike in the neighborhood, and I rode past a local high school where my sister went to high school, and I saw a practice, but it was kids. And, I almost ran my bike off the road, off the path, because I was like, oh, kids can play this sport too. So after that, when we settled with the next place we moved, had my parents sign me up, and I've been hooked ever
Awesome.
since.
Yeah, I'm glad you found out that kids could play football too.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it was kind of like a pivotal moment in my life because, like I said, other than that, I thought I would have to wait till, I was 18 or older or what have you. So,
Yeah. So you have a remarkable journey from youth football player to collegiate athlete at James Madison University. Looking back, what are some of the biggest lessons that football taught you both on and off the field?
on the field, football has taught me perseverance. Nothing ever came easy. Um, Everything on the football field you have to earn, through your hard work, your preparation. And even at each level, it gets different. Nowadays, it's different because of the tools and the resources that are available. But I didn't watch film when I was in youth league for sure. We didn't have huddle, and we watched film weekly in high school, maybe once a week. But in college, it became like, you know, classroom time was real important. Learning schemes and adjustments and studying film, not just watching film. And I tell athletes all the time, you can't watch film like you watch TV. You have to study it. You got to rewind, play back. You got to look for certain things, and, got to take notes and write things down and kind of piece things together. So, but perseverance and accomplishment. And off the field, um, I was in the locker room with a whole mix of people from different parts of the state, parts of the country, different nationalities, backgrounds, or what have you. So the sense of teamwork, I've never had a problem working with anybody. And, we always said in the locker room, all we care about is can you play? Can you help us win? Care what color you were or where you were from. So, you know, I would embrace anybody, that I had to work with.
Yeah, I think that's a good quality to have, being able to work with people of different backgrounds and different nationalities.
Yeah, I think sports transcends so many of the, what would be perceived as differences or, what have you. Not just football, I think any sport, because, you're in a team environment. So, you
Right.
kind of have to, for the betterment of the team and the success of the team, you got to get along with your teammates.
Right. And then could you talk a little bit about your scholarship story at James Madison University?
So um, can I say my high school name? No, that do I name
Yeah.
drop? All right. So I went to Chantilly High School. I broke my collarbone early part of my senior year, so I kind of sat the rest of the season and the entire playoffs. It's weird. I had a teammate who had a more compound fracture, but his healed faster than my hairline fracture. So I was never able to return. And I honestly had no initial aspirations to play college football. At our closing banquet, my head coach, he said something. He said something about all the seniors, and Coach Myers said when he talked about me, one of the last things he said was that I was going to help somebody at the next level, and he kind of partly flipped the light switch on for me because I had teammates coming up to me afterwards like, "Where are you going next year? Where are you?" And I kind of was taking it all in, and I was kind of like, well, I haven't decided yet because in my mind I'm like, I haven't decided anything yet. So I knew the schools that I'd applied to. And honestly, just visiting James Madison was going to be my choice because of the major that I majored in. And I liked the campus every time we visited. So when I got there, found out there was there were walk-on opportunities. I didn't do anything in the fall except kind of, weight train, kind of stay in condition, stay in shape. And I went out for the team in the spring. Um, so went through the spring. I thought I looked terrible, but I was invited back for fall training camp. And 2 days before the team was going to leave, the first game was versus McNeese State in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Special team coach stopped me in the locker room foyer and said he wanted to look at me on special teams. So I didn't know what that meant at the time, but the next day I was put on the kickoff team. I was put on the punt team. I think I was put on the punt return team. I wasn't on the kickoff return team yet. But that meant I was traveling with the varsity squad, just like that. So I told my parents, hey, I'm leaving for Louisiana in 2 days, and it was on from there. And just over the course of my career, I didn't play much other than special teams my freshman year. My sophomore year, I was splitting time with another senior. And then by my junior year, I was starting. And before the season, I met with the head coach, and he told me, he basically was just, Coach Wood was just, very blunt, straight out. He said, I know you are interested in possibly earning a scholarship. And he told me, he said, you either earn it all or I'm not giving you anything. Basically, he wasn't going to give me like a quarter or a half or whatever. He said, you either get it all or you get nothing. So, I had that motivation going into the year. We opened up the season against the University of Maryland. Best game of my college career. Best game statistic-wise, everything. But the next week against Hofstra, I break my thumb. And I shattered the joint here. I remember getting the x-rays that night. And it was amazing. I was praying it was just dislocated because, I didn't come out of the game when it happened, but the adrenaline was flowing until I let the trainers touch it on the sideline, and then that's when the pain set in. X-ray showed it was broken in 6 places, so the joint was basically shattered. Came home, had surgery. This happened on Saturday night. I think I had surgery on a Tuesday. Had screws put in it that are still there. And I sat out for 4 weeks. And I came back and I played the remainder of the season with the soft cast on. But I came back in, and it's fortunate. Well, I don't want to say that. Two of my teammates, they both did the same thing on a play when one wasn't supposed to. It was on a field goal block. Well, both the corners rushed. Only one is supposed to rush, and they ended up colliding, and one injured the other. So I got thrown right back into the starting lineup, like first game back. And I was able to finish the season really strong. From my position at cornerback, I ended up statistically, I finished 4th on the team in tackles. So I think I had a safety and a linebacker and 2 linebackers in front of me. So, for me, it was just showing that I was really active on the football field. So after the season, I met with the head coach again. And I remember he called me into his office, and he told me, he said he asked my position coach whether he should give me the scholarship. So I said, what'd he say? Well, he said, go ask him. I was like, okay. I was kind of like, well, I thought you were going to tell me. So anyway, I go down and talk to Coach Fellow. And Coach Fellow tells me, he said, I told him to give it to you. So, I was kind of speechless for a moment. And then I walked back to Coach Wood's office. And when I got there, the scholarship contract was on the desk. And, I signed it. And, that I think was my first tears of joy experience. And it was just so much because of the sense of accomplishment and the work that I had put in, and the fact that I was so worried that breaking my thumb may have robbed me of that opportunity, but it didn't. And, I just appreciated Coach for recognizing, the work that I put in and, what I was able to produce. And, I was on full scholarship from the rest of the way there. And, the other cool thing about that was my teammates had found out before I told anybody. So, when I was walking out, I was getting high fives and hugs, in the football office. And, they were happy for me. And that made me feel good that they were just genuinely happy to see that happen for
Yeah.
me. So that was an awesome experience.
I think that's a really good story of resilience because
I appreciate it.
you you broke your thumb and then you played through your injury and you ended up with that scholarship. I think that's amazing.
And if I could say, that's something I like to share with my athletes, and I tell them all the time, you know, everybody's path is different. And, just because, you may not have the full scholarship offer or anything coming out of the gate, but, you still have the opportunity to earn it, if it's there for you. And I still have, I didn't bring it with me. I still have my scholarship contract. The last one I signed, because we had Coach Wood left and Coach Matthews came in. So in '99, I had to sign a new contract, scholarship contract with his name on it. And I showed kids this. You can see, the head coach's name, the athletic director. You can see that it says full academic, school year, tuition, room and board. But I just show them to them because it's a real living thing, and that you can touch it, and that this can happen for you too. No matter what, and and it doesn't have to happen in the fairy tale sense. Maybe you don't go off to Alabama or something like that. Maybe just go to, a smaller school in Virginia or another state. But if that's your opportunity and that's your path, then take it. If somebody wants you, then you should go play for them.
Right.
You
And
know,
dreams happen on different levels.
right? Absolutely.
Yeah. And so after your playing career ended, you transitioned into coaching. What was it about teaching and mentoring athletes that made you realize you had found your next calling?
So actually, I didn't want to coach, and I I based that on what I saw of my college coaches and almost I, I don't want to say lifestyle, but the work schedules that they had to maintain. Like the lights in the football office were almost never off, and I'm just like, wow, these guys are always here. And one year, I think it was my sophomore year, my roommate and I, it was my redshirt sophomore year. My roommate and I, we had lived in an off-campus apartment, and we went over to visit two of the coaches. And when we got to their apartment, like it was like bare bones, nothing. Like I don't even know if they had mattresses or they had, bed frames, whatever in their room. But I know in the living room there were a couple chairs and there was a card table and that was it.
Wow.
And I was just kind of like, wow, I didn't know that they. I don't know if they had to live like that, but I came to realize their salaries weren't that uh, lucrative at the time. Being an assistant coach at a 1AA back then, so you know things are much different at JMU now. But that kind of put a bad taste in my mouth about coaching from as far as what kind of lifestyle can you live and maintain. Um, so it wasn't until years later, I think it was around 2012, a friend of mine was an assistant basketball coach at Dominion High School, and he reached out to me and said, hey, there's some coaching opportunities here. They're looking for some JV coaches. And in my mind, I just said, you know what, hey, I'll find out some more information about it. Well, 3 interviews later, um, here I am with the job as a assistant JV coach and assistant varsity coach. And it was one of the greatest experiences I ever had, especially working at that level. Um, so I realized for me that I had something to give back because I just basically shared my experiences and the knowledge that I had from the game and the life lessons that it taught me. So I just tried to pass those on, kind of pay it forward with the kids. And I realized that as it went along, like this was, the right opportunity to take, and it was a great experience.
Yeah. And then what from that experience was that what inspired you to create skills and drills?
Actually, it did, and I'll tell you exactly when that happened. We were preparing for a playoff game. We were playing in the regional championship game. We were at Salem High School, so we were in Salem, Virginia. And I played defensive back. So one of the other athletes, I played defensive back, but I coached linebackers and running backs on the high school team. One of the DBs asked me to help him warm up before the game. So I was like, sure, okay. So we went outside, and I honestly just put him through some of the drills that I would have warmed up with in college, and I may have added something to us. We did about 4 or 5 drills. I think we got warmed up for about 15 minutes. And when we were done, I kind of went over to him and said, you feeling all right? And he was didn't say a whole lot, but he had this look on his face. And I was like, what's wrong? Were the drills okay? He's like, the drills were great. And I said, well, what's the matter? He said, I've never done any of those before. He said, I've never even seen those drills before. So kept that in the back of my mind. And then I started to think about it, I think on the bus ride home, like, maybe there's an opportunity for me to, branch off. Because I'd seen and heard of other trainers, but I never thought about it for myself. But after doing that, I was like, well, maybe I have a little more to offer. And it kind of spun into a program where Skills and Drills was birthed just to be kind of a DB type training drill, which is what I specialize in, as based on my position. But then it grew because I said I coached linebackers and coached running backs. I played running back in high school. And then I just started to lean on some of the things that I'd seen experience-wise, and then, just being creative with putting drills together, and thinking about, well, how would I prepare and how would I do this or that, so how, that I could pass on to these kids. And then it became, wide receivers were added to it. I coached at another school. I did 1 year at Bishop O'Connell, and I coached wide receivers and DBs there before I got out of coaching. And then, I was adding quarterbacks, I was adding D-line footwork, and I created a footwork program, then I had a conditioning program. So it just kind of kept growing and materializing, and, I'm just like, God, all right, stop with all the ideas, because every time I get an idea, I spin off another program. So that's kind of where it is. And this Skills and Drills, I started in 2017.
So almost 10 years.
Almost 10 years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you often emphasize character, discipline, and accountability alongside athletic performance. Why do you believe those qualities are just as important as speed, strength, and skill development?
Character,
discipline, and accountability.
okay. So one, I always tell the kids, your character matters, and it's not so much on the field. I always tell them the type of person you are as a teammate, and especially to the high school guys, because I said, when these coaches come to recruit, they're putting their stamp of recommendation on you to their head coach. So kind of their reputation's on the line, but every head coach, when they come in, they establish their culture and type of kids or the athletes they want in their locker room. So I'm like, no coach is going to let you and your attitude and your ways come in and, kind of break up what he or she is established. So I'm like, you're not worth the risk. No matter how good you are, they would just go on and find the next version of you that doesn't have all those, issues or baggage, if you will. So, I tell them that, and why do you want to be, do you want to be the type of teammate that the teammate that your team doesn't like, that guys don't like playing with you, that they don't want to block for you, that they don't, enjoy being around you? I used to tell athletes all the time, with guys in the locker room, why do you want your teammates to fear you, or why do you walk around with that persona, nobody should mess with you, but then these guys are watching your back on Friday nights or Saturday afternoons, and I think your character matters to them, because as a teammate, you should value each other. You should matter to me, or like I matter to you. Like you have my back, like I have your back, and you're there when I look, and I'm there when you look. So I think, like I said, character matters. As far as fitting in and being a part of the team. You know, Even if you're not a guy that's playing, you know, all the time. I had guys when I coached high school, that weren't as athletic and they didn't play as much. But I tell them I appreciate the fact that you come to practice every day and you put in the work. And I have a joke with them and I say, you don't get on my nerves. You're not here screwing around. I don't have to look and tell you to stop. Whatever you're paying attention, you're locked in. And, I said, I appreciate that. And that keeps in the back of my mind if I do have an opportunity or, hey, you know what, maybe I need a special teams spot filled, then you're the person I would think of because I see the work you're putting in, and I see the character. You've caused me to develop trust, which I think, is huge in coaching, that you want your coach to trust you and believe in you. As far as discipline, look, hard work pays off, and tell the kids all the time, you know, what we do when nobody's watching, is where all the work is done. I always tell kids, look, you're not going to flip a switch on Friday night and just become this whatever. I said the guys that can flip switches, they play on Sundays, and most of them have two commas in their checks because they can flip that switch off and on. So I'm like, we're not at that level yet. So we got to put in the work, and it shows. And I tell them all the time, the work that you put in. I say coaches are watching everything. Coaches don't miss anything. When you think they're not watching, they are watching. You think they're not listening, they are. And I said, you'd be fooling yourself if you thought you had a terrible week of practice and your coach thought Friday night, well, he's just going to be, or she's going to just be this. I keep saying he because I'm talking about football, but I'm in any sport, basketball, baseball, softball, whatever, that you're just going to become this different person on game day. They're going to go off your track record from the week. And again, there's that word trust. That can I trust you on game day to do the right thing? Because what you've shown me throughout the week is that you chances are you're not going to do it, or you're going to get there Friday because you haven't been paying attention, you haven't been locked in. So when the situation comes, you're not going to do what I as a coach expect you to do because you may not know what to do because you weren't locked in and weren't paying attention. So discipline as far as how you prepare yourself, preparation with the film watching, your practice habits, even the way you condition. We learned a hard lesson when I was a coach before we lost the game because we ran out of gas. But the kids kind of told them, you guys got what you deserve, because throughout the conditioning through the summer, everybody's lollygagging, or the skill guys like to hide with the linemen, the bigger guys, so they like to hide in there so they can run slower. And, right. And I said, we got exactly what we deserve. And everybody's like, well, coach, I want to condition next week. I can't wait to get out there. I'm like, it's too late for that. And this game's going to come back to bite us. And it did in our playoff seeding eventually, because there was a game we should have won. I'm sorry, what was the third?
It was character, discipline, and accountability.
Oh, absolutely. Accountability. Accountable for your actions. You have to be responsible for the things that you do, and you're responsible for your job. You can't do someone else's job on the field because, well, and if you do their job, who's going to do your job? So you have to be accountable for what is asked of you and what is expected of you. And even down to your valuables or your equipment. I have athletes come to training all the time. Oh, I forgot my cleats, or my mom forgot to pack my cleats, or my dad. I'm like, no. It's not mom and dad's responsibility. I'm like, you have to start taking ownership of this because you're invested in this. You should pack your bag the night before and make sure you have everything so you don't get up the morning of and you're scrambling, because you're going to tend to forget things. And mom and dad may not know that, hey, I like to practice or train in these gloves. I like to play games in these gloves, or I like to wear these cleats for this. They don't know that. So, and it's not their responsibility to know that. You're an athlete. You should know where all your stuff is. So when you get there, you have everything you need. Because, sometimes athletes are superstitious. I don't have my lucky wristband, or, I don't have my towel. Now you're all flustered and mentally, you know, off off track with what you need to do. But if you take care of your business the day before, part of preparation and being accountable to yourself is, like I said, don't come to practice and tell me mom or dad did anything. You, like I said, you got to have some skin in this game too.
Yeah, I think these are also important, like life lessons.
Absolutely,
Yeah, you can apply it to
absolutely,
anywhere in your life.
absolutely.
Yeah. Youth sports continue to evolve every year. What trends or changes are you seeing in athletic training today that parents and athletes should be paying attention to?
Well, from what I observe, it's it's different from when I was a player. Today's athletes, you know, they don't have the road that kind of, when I say us, the old heads had to travel. We had practice whenever coach said we had to practice. We had 2 a day practices, might be 3 a day practices, but he didn't like one of the 2 a day practices, and, nowadays, back then, I never dared to think to question or talk back to my coach. Now from what I see, and I'm not saying anybody shouldn't have a voice or opinion, but you know, just sometimes I don't see the level of respect or reverence that some used to have for coaches that they don't have now. And, even parents advocating for their kids, which is great, but, you know, the coaches' opinions used to be more valued, which I think they are in some cases still. But, parents, that's your son or your daughter. And, you see them a certain way that, and I hate to say it, it's not all the time with rose-colored glasses, but, you may feel like your son or daughter is not getting the opportunity that they deserve. And I always used to tell parents, instead of coming Friday night, how about come stand at the fence on Monday through Thursday and watch your athlete practice? And then you'll see why what's not happening on Friday nights, because of the product he's producing in practice. Because he may go home or she may go home and tell you one story, but why don't you come witness the real thing? The other thing too with the youth sports, it's gotten so serious nowadays. Like winning, it almost seems in some cases that the winning matters almost as much to the kids as it does like the coaches, like the competition with the coaches. Where I've seen, and I'm not saying this is the case everywhere, but I've seen YouTube videos of like coaches going at it, not the kids. And I'm just like, man, don't you guys have to go to work tomorrow? And where I've heard cases of recruiting, where, they're grabbing athletes who may not be in the area, what have you, you pick them up for a tournament because you want to win the tournament. So, and I just feel like, well, what does that say to the kids that have been there all week working and, game day comes and you grab somebody that they never seen before that you knew of and, you just needed them for this game. And, I feel like sometimes or in some cases things have gotten a little diluted. Like I said, just based on what I've witnessed, and I'm not saying it's everywhere and it's not everybody. I just, I don't remember when I was younger any of that, being the case. When I was playing, parents were cheering and yelling, but it wasn't like, parents weren't on the field, they weren't on the sideline, and, they weren't that close to the action. So, it was just kind of, we belonged to the coach, and that was it.
Yeah, like
Did I
letting.
answer your question?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
it did. And then looking ahead, what are your goals for Skills and Drills Institute, and how do you hope to continue serving athletes, families, and the community in the years to come?
So for me, my goal has always been, you know, I just want to see my athletes do well. And that's on the field or off the field. Any athlete, I tell them, look, in my mind, I don't care if you never go pro or what have you. I want you to be able, if that's what you want, I want you to see your dream come true. But if not, I hope when I meet you in 10 years down the road, hey man, you're a wife, you're a husband, you're a mother, a father, you're a productive member of society, but you're doing well in life. And I hope some of the things that we worked on out here help transition into other areas of life. The challenges that we went through during training, the way you saw yourself work and overcome out here, I hope you can work and overcome them in the classroom, or in any other life situation that you're faced with, that you won't give up, that you know, if you work hard, you can do it. And then for me, like I said, I've always just wanted to have a reputable business. I prided myself on making sure, the name, skills, and drills is, clean in these streets, so to speak. That, I don't have any parents, you know, there's no rumors about me. I don't have any parents saying, hey, this guy mistreated my kid, don't go to this guy, because I've never wanted any of that. And I've been very particular even about the people I would interact with, reputation wise, and just what I do. It really is humbling to me when parents tell me, I could take my kid here or there, but I bring him to you because I like what you do with them, or my kid listens to you. I trust you. Parents all the time come to drop their kids off and they leave. And I always tell them, I'll be here when you get back. I'm not going to leave your son here because the session's over and I got to go. No, I'm responsible for him when you leave him in my care. So, I just always wanted to have a great reputation. I'm not a coach that, I'm a motivator and I'm an encourager. I'm not a big yeller or screamer. I don't curse at my kids. I just feel like, and this is me. Now, I've experienced whatever, and I always tell kids, chew the meat, spit out the bones. Behind all or whatever every coach has, there's a message in there that you got to be able to find. You may have to find it, kind of a couple of F-bombs, but there it is, followed by some. But, but I tell the kids, for me, I'm always going to speak to you respectfully, as a person. I'm not going to demean you. Now, but if you need me to kick you in the butt and nudge you, yeah, I can do that. And I've had kids say that to me, coach, they want to be coached harder. And I appreciate that. But then some, I always say, the ones you may have to handle with oven gloves, that personality-wise, they're just different. Man, you can't talk to this one the way you talk to that one, or coach him, or teach him the way you teach this one. So everybody learns different. So, those are things that I've taken in. So for me, with my business and with training, I tell kids, athletes, two things. I said, listen, if you ever work with anybody, number one, they need to be able to explain to you what you're working on, what you're doing, so that you understand it. It doesn't matter that they understand. It's their idea. Of course they understand it. Of course it makes sense to them. It needs to make sense to you, and they need to be able to explain it in a way that you can understand and execute. But they may also have to explain it in a way differently so the person behind you in line can understand and execute. And they got to be able to do that. And I said, number two, they should always be able to tell you how, when, or where this applies in a game situation. So if you say, coach, well, when would I use that or execute it? They should have an answer right off the bat. Scenario, this. And I say, if you can't get those things, you may need to consider, who you're working with, because I'm not one that shoots from the hip. You can be creative or what have you, but I feel like you always have to have a plan. And I think kids can see through that. Kids know whether you know what you're talking about or not. And, they know if you're making it up as you go along, or if you're reaching for what have you, and they're there. And then I think, it's hard for them to buy what you're selling if they feel like you don't know, you're not sure even what you're saying. So, so for me, like I said, my reputation with the business, and I like for the kids to come. I tell them, look, we're playing a game. Training is not hard. I always tell them, look, this is not a long division problem. This is not a science project. This is sports, football or whatever. It's supposed to be fun. Now it's challenging. And I said, if it was easy, everybody be out here. It'd be standing room only, because everybody be out here doing it. All your friends would be out here, but some of them are at home playing video games or watching TV. You're out here putting in the work. So, you're going to have to give to get. So, it's going to be challenging. And that's my job, to continue to up the challenges, to pull the best out of you. And if there's more in there, I got to continue to pull it out, because what's the point of doing something that you've mastered and you can do forward and backwards? There's no challenge in that. We're not getting any better. Now we're kind of just leveling off. We want to continue to ascend. So Coach once said when I was, I want to say my high school coach said this. He said, you either you're either getting better or you're getting worse, but you never stay the same. So that's my goal is just for the athletes to continue to ascend and to get better.
Yeah. And it sounds like you care about your athletes truly, you know.
It's funny, and I'm gonna tell you who said this to me. I got a compliment, and it said, I'm looking at the way you respond to your athletes, and it looks like you always respond from a coach's perspective of what's best for the athletes and about their development, but not so much as a salesperson or someone trying to fill a session. And I appreciated that. But you know who told me that? ChatGPT.
Wow.
Yeah, I use ChatGPT when if I have to send a long email out, and I always want to make sure, hey, does this sound too personal? I don't want to offend the parent, but I want to get my point across. But I want them to, feel like, I'm always going to have their athletes' best interest at heart. And, that's what helps me kind of with the wording, smooths it out for me. And that's what it told me. He said, I've been working, this is how I was talking to me, I've been
Yeah.
working with you for a while here. And I noticed whenever you respond to your parents, whenever you, send me, things to rewrite, you always talk from a coach's perspective, and you always have the athlete's development and best interest at heart. And, never sounding like a salesperson trying to fill a slot. So I appreciated that, ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So
And I'm sure the parents also appreciate that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I over the years I've been blessed, and I'm so grateful. I was thinking about this on the way over here. I've always worked well with the parents that I've had the opportunity to work with. Thus far, I haven't had, I don't know if you want to call them those parents, or I've never had to experience that. Most of them have always trusted my judgment. And, like I said, I try to conversate with them and kind of keep it collaborative. Because for me, I'm, I don't ever feel like I'm the end all be all. For me, I've always felt like I'm a part of the village. And I know I'm not the only I'm not the only show in town. So there's other trainers, so I appreciate the fact that you're trusting in me. And then if you make a decision to go otherwise, that's fine. Then my time hopefully was well spent, and that was my time with your athlete. And now he's moved on or she's moved on. But I appreciate being part of the village. So I hope, like I said, to do my part there. And parents have told me, like I said before, where they're like, my kid listens to you, that's why I bring him here. Or you know, my kid trusts you, or I trust you, or I like the the way you work with them. I believe it or not, I have athletes that are not playing competitive sports anymore. They just come for the footwork training and the work to stay in shape. But they just like, what I do, and the parents like what I do, so they just want the kids to stay with me, and I appreciate that. I don't take that lightly or take it for granted. So that's why, like I said, each one of my athletes, I try to get to know them. They're not just numbers to me when they come out there. I got to break the ice with the new ones because they won't say two words to me. And I'm like, I tell the parents all the time, a session or two for them to get to know me to get to know them, kind of break down a couple, put some guards down, so they realize, hey, you know what, they could get in the car and say, hey, mom, I hate that guy. I don't ever want to go back to him again. So, or they could say, yeah, I want to come back the next week. So then I try to get to know them, outside of the field. What are they interested in? What's their favorite subject? What do they do to have fun? And then, or whatever sports teams are interested in. So I keep that in mind. So when they come back the next time, I've learned something, or I brought something with me to conversate, to continue the conversation. And it's just to set them more at ease and to make them feel more comfortable. And even the way I train, I'm just trying to build confidence. I tell the kids all the time, I call my training grounds the lab. And, the lab is where we come to make those mistakes, where we come to learn from them. So it's okay to mess up here, because this is where we're going to correct and learn from it. But I don't want you to be afraid like you're doing something wrong, or that I'm going to be mad at you. And like, no, it's never like that. And that's me just continue to build their confidence. So once they're training confidently, it doesn't matter what happens, because then what I like to tell the parents is, by about 4 sessions with them, I'll see them turn a corner. But then they'll turn a corner mentally, because then they're going to start thinking like an athlete, because that's how I'm training them. And a lot of times they'll stop in the middle of a rep because they felt what they did before I can say it. And I always ask them. But then that's them saying, hey, coach, can we start that again? Can we do it again? Or they're not satisfied with their rep and they want to do another one. So, once we get to that point, then, they say we're cooking with grease. And, then we're developing, we laid the foundation. Now we're starting to build upon it.
Yeah, awesome. So teaching them that recognition and being able to, find where they can improve.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And for athletes, parents, and coaches who would like to learn more about your programs or connect with you, where can they find Skills and Drills Institute and get started?
So I have a website, it's www.skillsanddrillsinstitute.com. My email, can I say that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
First podcast. All right. Coach Carp, CARP at skillsanddrillsinstitute.com. I'm on Instagram at Skills and Drills. Oh, and Skills and Drills is not A-N-D, it's the letter N, like here. Skills and Drills. So, because there is a Skills and Drills, that's not me.
Okay.
So, on Instagram at Skills and Drills, on X at _Skills and Drills, Facebook Skills and Drills Institute, and TikTok Skills and Drills. Oh, and YouTube Skills and Drills.
Awesome.
So, different social media outlets. You can direct message me, email me, or however. And I look forward to hearing from you. Is this my sales pitch? Sorry.
Yeah, so lots of different ways to reach you.
Yeah, so absolutely. And like I said, I'm local in the area. I'm in Ashburn, Virginia, and I've been here. I train outside on the grass. And, I've been at the location that I'm at for the past 8 years. Yes, since 2018. So, and I've been there for a great relationship with the facility, and that's where I've been.
Awesome. And then as we wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to add that we haven't touched on today?
I don't think so. I just would like to say thank you. Like I said, for you guys contacting me out of the blue. Like I said, I've never done a podcast before. And I was a little apprehensive till I looked at it. I saw some familiar faces on your social media page. So I was just like, wow, this would be a new experience and hopefully, fruitful one for the both of us. So I just thank you for the opportunity. And I hope everybody who's listening learned more about me, because if you ever watch any of my videos, I'm not in any of them. I don't want to be in any of them. I want, when I post videos, it's to display the athletes. Now, to display the work that we do, you'll hear my voice, but, I don't want it to be about me. So now you're seeing the guy behind the camera. Hi, everybody.
Right.
I keep it, if I can say this, I used to tell the kids, you familiar with Vlad TV?
No.
All right, he's a podcaster. He interviews a lot of artists, hip hop and whatever. But he's always the voice behind the camera. The camera's always on them, and he's back there in the voice. So I tell him, I keep it Vlad TV. I never wanted to be in there, and I don't, even when someone films for me, film the athlete. It's not about what I look like or what I'm doing or seeing. They can hear my voice and coaching them, but focus on their movements and what they're doing. So
yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for joining me on
Thank
the
you for having me.
today. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, passion, and inspiring story with us. And I wish you the very best and all that comes your way in the future.
Thank you so much.
If you're a business owner, founder, or entrepreneur, we would love to have you on the Alamon Show. Just go to alamonphotography.com/podcast, sign up to be featured.